Yay! Hi, everybody, and welcome back to my channel, Turning Readers into Writers with Emma Desi. And we're here for another lovely interview. And this time we are chatting to the lovely Kate Mahony. Now, Kate has worked as a journalist both in the UK and in New Zealand, and she is a long-time writer of short stories and flash fiction with many published anthologies, among them Best New Zealand Fiction #6, published by Random House New Zealand. She has a Masters of Creative Writing from the International Institute of Modern Letters at Te Harenga Waka, Victoria University of Wellington in New Zealand. Her debut novel, Secrets of the Land, was published in September 2023 and is a dual timeline story set partly in the 1860s New Zealand wars in Taranaki and modern-day Australia. It features three main characters and is set in Australia, New Zealand, and Ireland, drawing on Kate's Irish ancestry and predilection for ghosts. So welcome, Kate. Lovely to have you
Thank
here.
you. So nice to be with you, Emma.
Yay, fabulous. So I always start off with the same simple question. Tell us about your kind of pathway to writing, because it's often for most people it's not a straight pathway. There's a bit of a scenic route.
Yes, yes. So I can't remember at primary school, but definitely at secondary school, I was writing. And I think I won some competitions. And often I think it was more non-fiction, writing an essay or a speech, that sort of thing. But somewhere by the time I went at a very young age to be a trainee for teaching, because I was from a big family and, all the girls sort of went nursing or teaching in those days. And so by then I started writing sort of short stories and poetry and having them published in the Teachers' Call magazine. And the first story I sent was very emotional and whatever. And I used a pseudonym. And the guy that was the editor, who was very young, I mean, older than me, but youngish, he came back and said, if you're going to take writing seriously, use your own name. So I took that, even way back at 18 or 17, I took that to heart. So that was probably the beginning. And I think I'd always been writing things. And then when I was working in England on Woman magazine in my 20s, I went on a course at the Avon Foundation in the UK. It's very famous.
Yeah,
With
I've
two
done one
famous
there.
authors. But I can't actually remember what I wrote, but whatever I wrote, I went to have my meeting with the two tutors, two novelists, and they said, oh, this is fantastic or something, you should go back. You're on the start of a novel. It'll take you 5 years. And I went back to work on the magazine, and I remember thinking, 5 years, that's a lot of time in my life. So I didn't do it, and of course years go by. And then back in New Zealand, when I was writing journalism features and so forth, I was writing short stories. And I went on various courses. Every so often you'd see one. And then at one point, I did an undergraduate short story course and short fiction. The people on that course, 4 of us out of 10 got onto the Masters, which is a highly sought after course with, it started by someone called Bill Manhire, who's very famous in New Zealand. If you ever saw, I did the Bill Manhire course, and he was my supervisor. People are really impressed. And on that course, I was writing short stories and taking them into him every 2 weeks. And he said, I think you're on one of them. I think you're trying to write a novel, set it in New Zealand, not the UK, and blah, blah, blah. And so that novel, I was halfway through the course, I wrote 85,000 words, cannot believe it, in about 4 or 5 months.
Wow.
And then when I got my examiner's report, I mean, it was pretty favorable, but there was a bit about the narrator not being, really seen, those, and a couple of things like that. And I think I sort of got jaded. I didn't know what to do to fix it. And I didn't. And then within about a year or two, a well-known New Zealand author came out with 2 books. One was called The Writing Class, which is what mine had been. And the second one was The Writing Festival. So I just sort of dumped that book under a bed side table or something. And I sort of say that was my starter novel, my practice So I'd already written a novel before this one.
Yeah, yeah. Ah, okay. Yeah, and I think every writer does need their what I call apprenticeship novels.
Yes.
You kind of
Yeah.
you need
Yeah.
those. But you've sort of mentioned there that you'd gone in to do teacher training, and then when you came to the UK, you were working as a journalist.
I
So
moved
how
into
did that happen?
publishing. Yeah. I did do a bit of teaching at Shepherd's Bush and this comprehensive in London, but I really had wanted to be in writing or publishing, all those sort of things. So I ended up leaving teaching and just going after a year and a half, I think, to a small publishing company that did like posters for pop group type thing. It wasn't fabulous, but it got me a start. And from there, I went to a magazine called Ms. London that
Yeah.
was given out on the train.
You,
And
I
I
used
was
to read that every day. Yeah.
chief sub-editor, even though there was no one else, just me being the sub. And from there, I went to a teenage romance magazine at IPC, or Reed Publishing, owned all the magazines in the world, sort of. And so I went to Love Affair. And then from Love Affair, I went to Woman Magazine. So that was about 5 years of working. And then when I came back to New Zealand after 7 years away, I got a job on a newspaper in the capital city, sort of sub-editing. So I did a lot of sub-editing, fixing up other people's work, but I always wanted to be the writer. And in time, I started doing newspaper articles and so forth.
Well, it sounds like right
It's a
from the
circuitous
beginning.
route. Yeah. Sorry?
Yeah, yeah, circuitous. Yeah, but it does sound like right from the beginning, people had spotted that you had talent with words and were
Yes.
able to tell a story. And it's great to hear that you made that switch. You just kind of decided, okay, teaching is fine, but it's not what I love. And a big comprehensive, I can imagine, was
Yeah.
challenging.
Boys, all boys school. Yes.
And so then you just went for it. And I love that that has kind of worked out. So you've been doing journalism work, you've been doing short stories, but in the midst of all that, you were also writing your apprenticeship novels.
Trying to write a novel. Yeah.
Yeah. And so how did you find the difference between particularly writing a short story and writing a novel? Did you find one easier to do than the others apart from kind of length? But was the approach any different, or did you approach them both?
I
Both
think
well?
the short stories you can contain, and I'm probably a bit of a, all over the show. Well, I'm not ADD, I hope, but you know what I mean. I found short stories, you can write them and then rework them and say send them somewhere and they don't want it, and then you look at it again and rework it. So you're constantly layering or perfecting. A novel is a big project. That's the main difference.
Yeah.
And you have to keep a lot in your head. Or I was talking about this on radio the other day. Some people do Excel sheets where they have all their characters and a lot of detail. I'm more what can I say? Not spontaneous, but a flexible sort of person. So I don't do these heavy plots, but the back of my head, I know where the story's going, and then I have to get
Yeah.
it there.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea to do. I always encourage writers to do that. Even if you're a pantser or a discovery writer and you're writing by the seat of your pants, I do think it's advisable to kind of know where you're headed to in the middle,
Yeah.
and then to know where you're headed to towards the end, and then you have that freedom to get
And the
there.
middle is the harder bit, I think, trying to keep it going with enough story. So
Yeah.
I do sort of have the beginning, I have the end, and I have other things. But yeah, I'm not a formal plotter, but I will write pages of notes of, like a synopsis type thing. Yeah,
Right.
an outline.
Okay. So enough that you feel that you know how you're going to get there, but
Yes.
it's giving you freedom to change things up as you need it and allow for the surprises along the way.
Sort of, yes, yes. And I saw something the other day I thought was quite useful, which was like to make a list of 30 scenes. And since I already knew what the book I was working on could be about, that was quite helpful.
Yes, yeah. Yes, it's good. Yeah. Yeah, good tip. We'll put that in. So Secrets of the Land is dual timeline.
In fact, it's almost 3 timelines.
Okay. So what made you opt to go for so many timelines?
I feel like I know that Bill Manhard said to me one time that I was good at doing scenes with lots of people in. I feel like, and I'm from a very big family of 9 children and 2 adults, so I feel like my life is full of happenings and lots of people, I don't know. So somehow to get the story, I started with this young girl that I'd already written about in Best New Zealand Fiction, more or less, same sort of girl. And then I had this stranger who appears on the farm they're working on. And I don't know why I had the third person, and she was the hardest to do. She's the one who comes to try and find out what's going on the land. And so she sort of pulls it all together. She's a reporter that didn't do very well and is now working in a publishing company that's a bit more boring. So I'm not quite sure why I decided to have three. They just sort of came to be.
And so what are the three timelines that you've got? You've got 1860.
So we've got starts in about 2018 in Melbourne, when a young woman is approached by an unusual looking man who tells her she has a grandfather who needs her help in New Zealand. And he's an odd character. She didn't have a grandfather, he was dead, her mother had said, or she didn't have any family except a mum and her. And so that sort of started it. And then we sort of she heads off for some reason. She goes to that country to meet the grandfather. And then we move into a young girl who's in fact that character's mother. And they've come out from Ireland, and the father's sort of been involved in a crime to do with the IRA, a bank robbery. So they've turned up in New Zealand. So we've sort of got all those links. And then there's this person who's young at the time who is Irish and joins the British Army to fight against the local inhabitants. And somehow all these people interact and happen.
So
people keep saying how it works.
Oh, I'm sure it does. I'm sure it does. But I'm guessing that all three of these characters were talking to you very strongly and saying,
Yeah, they are. Yes.
You need to do my point of view. You need to tell my story as well.
Definitely Aoife, the little Irish girl, and then who becomes an adult later on, obviously. And then Michael, the soldier guy, I feel he's really had a story he wanted to tell. And Imogen was the hardest because I needed her to look into things, but I needed to get to know her personality.
Mm-hmm. And she presumably is the modern day journalist.
Yes, yeah. And a younger woman.
And so how did you sort of approach those different timelines? So, for example, I know some writers will start at the beginning and just write the way through and chop and change the point of view character. Other writers I've come across, they'll write the whole story of one era and then they'll do the next era. How did you find that?
I feel like I probably chop and changed. And as it happened, just jumping ahead, but when I did send it to the publisher, one of their things immediately when they send back their 2 or 3 pages of thoughts was that the people reading it liked the soldier. And so my original story, he had sort of unfolded and you didn't get to know who he was till about the last few chapters. And they said he deserves to be up the front. And there's a bit of a story. I brought him right up the front to chapter 1. And then when the book was about to be published, some other people on the executive suddenly said they felt it started better with the girl meeting him. And I went to myself, well, that's exactly how I had started it. So, it's certainly a lot of work, as you know, because continuity and changing things.
Yeah. And so I think that's a really great example for listeners who haven't yet published to know that until it goes to press, there's still changes that can be made and there's lots of revision to be done.
Huge. Yeah.
Just being patient and being flexible again.
Which I am, yes.
Yeah. And so
often with editors, you when you're sort of new to it, I mean, I've had lots of friends look at my work, short stories and that, but writers, but if you're dealing with an actual editor whose job to do that, it's knowing how often you can say no. Or I tended to think, oh no, that was quite a good suggestion, and I would go with it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe again being flexible, but
yeah. And so were there any points at which you felt strongly enough that you could say, actually, I don't agree with this suggestion that you're making, and kind of giving a little bit of pushback on that?
I didn't probably do it very often. I can't remember now because we're talking nearly 2 years ago. I mean, it all takes time. I do know that there was one word that one of the editors in the company, who's a writer, so sort of suggested, and just one, and I remember thinking, I don't really love that word, and then I just went with it. So to describe the old grandfather, it was just a small word, and that's interesting how words mean different things to different people.
Yeah, that's true. But it sounds like then on the whole, you kind of agreed with the suggestions that they made and were willing to go along with that. And so from the time you started the book to publication day, how long can you remember did that take to write it?
Well, first of all, I feel like I've been writing that book since about 2017 because I can find files from that date. So I think probably the way I worked, I was working on it, but then I was doing short stories and sending them off to competitions and getting published. And, so I was taking it maybe to my writers group, getting their opinion. Then at some point, I got two friends who are writers. One's got a PhD in creative writing to read the whole book. Then there's something called the New Zealand Society of Authors, which is a company, not a company, it's a group organization. And they had a manuscript assessment that's highly sought after. So there were 80 applied that year, and they took 13, and mine was one of them. The person they sent it to look through it and come back with suggestions is someone I happen to already know, but she's written lots of, mainly for children, I think, but books on history, the New Zealand history, the New Zealand wars. So she was the right person, And so I think she gave me notes, she did. And then we also met for coffee one day and just talked it through. Yeah. So that was really helpful. And I think having got that manuscript assessment and been listed on their webpage, as doing it, I then, was more looking to get it published. I saw an opening came up at Cloud Ink where they were looking for manuscripts. So that sort of pushed me to send it. And you only had to send 20,000 or 10,000 words. And I remember when it came back, I did feel a bit, and they said, we'd like to see the rest. I did panic a bit, like, oh my God, It's quite a funny feeling reading this email saying, oh no, they want to see it.
Yeah, it's funny your response because most people I think would be like, yes, but
I know.
panicking that it wasn't quite ready.
Probably, yes. And I think it was ready because I've been working on it for so long. And as it happened, we then, when there was more changes with there was an outside editor who was good. And there was also the people on the Cloud Ink, they do editing themselves. So there's quite a lot of input, yeah.
And so how did you find the manuscript review process? Because it's slightly different from an edit, but did you find that valuable? Did that help you with kind of future revisions, or actually did it just kind of affirm what you'd already written?
So which review do you mean by that? Like the assessment, or do you mean when they chose to use it?
That original manuscript review that you applied for.
Oh yeah, no, I think that was useful. I can't really remember. I couldn't bring it to mind right now, but I think there was plenty there to be helpful.
Yeah.
So it wasn't an edit so much. I think it was a bit of editing. She actually did, as she did it, she did editing. Now I remember, but it was sort of broader picture stuff, I think.
And so do you think you would do that again for your next book?
I would if, I think you're only allowed to apply once, but on the other hand, you can go to these people who they choose for you and pay privately. They offer work. So I probably would. I haven't thought that far advanced, but it is very useful having an expert eye over something.
Yeah,
definitely.
Feedback is so essential, isn't it? So you can see where you need work, but also, and I think a lot of people forget this, reviews can also tell you what you're getting right, because there are things that we all do well and we need that boost.
The funny thing is, I said to the woman who'd done the the manuscript assessment when we talked another time, and I said something about how the editors had thought I took too long to get to the place. There was all this description. I'd actually gone there in the car, someone driving, and I was writing notes about mailboxes and things. And anyway, they said, oh, we can cut a lot of this. And when I told her, she said, oh, I really liked that. So it's so subjective.
Yeah,
writing,
isn't it
people's
just?
appreciation.
Yeah, so subjective. And it's a great example too that, editors and agents and publishers, they're going on, yes, market knowledge, but also what they
Yes,
like and they believe in. Just
exactly.
the same way that your average Amazon reader, your average bookstore reader is going to be viewing it based on what they like and their own personal
Yes,
preferences.
exactly. No, that's so true.
Yay. So you reached out to Cloud Inc., you said. Was
Yes.
that, did you approach them directly or did you go through
And they put out, I think it was on Facebook, they put out a call out because in New Zealand, they do now have literary agents or an agency everyone's going to, but it's well known that you can just approach the publishers yourself.
Ah,
But I think when I was looking, some publishers had a closed, they had seasons,
yeah.
but this was an actual call out saying, authors, we're looking for manuscripts.
Oh,
And
fantastic.
so, yeah, so I sent the 10,000 or 20,000 words.
Brilliant. So for any of our New Zealand authors listening who might not be aware of that, then yeah, you don't need to find an agent. You can go
Exactly.
look at their
Yeah,
websites
yeah, yeah.
and approach
Yes.
them.
And some of them will even show you how to submit it from their website. One publisher who I can't remember the name now, which I mean, but could be Hachette, it could be someone, they have like a Friday submission day that people can submit, a chapter or something.
Yeah. Oh, I wish they were all like that. That would be
I
lovely.
know. I know. It's always been like that. And then as I say, we now have a literary agency that a lot of people have signed up with, but that's relatively new.
Okay.
Mm.
How interesting. It's interesting how it works so differently in different
Everywhere.
countries.
As people keep saying, publishing is such a mystery. It's also New Zealand's got quite a few small publishers, and I know quite a few people have been, and my one is small as well, but who have been published by these smaller publishers. Yeah,
I think that must be lovely because then you're with people who genuinely are taking on your book because they love it, and then you get to have a relationship with them.
yeah,
Yeah,
quite close. Yes.
yeah, lovely. So, many of our listeners will not yet be at that publishing stage, and so I'd love it if you could share maybe one or two things that, as you've gone through that process of publishing, is there anything that has surprised you and you weren't expecting, that would be good for other writers coming through the ranks to kind of know about?
I think let me think. I feel like the thing is that you realize once your book, once you've got the cover and blah blah blah, it's all been done and everything. That's sort of when the work begins, because it's no good having a novel. I see this sometimes on Facebook, people talking, I've put my novel on Amazon, now what? But the main thing is to be thinking well in advance. And if I was giving any tips, it would be things like, web page, social media places, building up contacts of people,
Mhm.
lots of things that the smaller the publisher, the more you do,
Mhm.
really. So it's learning, you can't be it can't be an introvert. You really have to put yourself out there in many ways.
Yeah, and that's a real challenge for some, I think, isn't
For
it? Yeah.
some, yeah, yeah.
So do you, for example, have you started building a mailing list or you got a Facebook page or things like
Yeah,
that?
got all of those. Yeah. So LinkedIn, Facebook, I've got a personal one and then I've got a writer one. Instagram,
Mhm.
that's a good one. That's probably the social media. Then I've got a website, and if people sign up to my website, they get a free copy of my short story that was in the Best New Zealand Fiction, because it's a similar character. So if people wanted to read more about a little Irish girl in a New Zealand farm,
Mhm. And get a flavor for your style of writing and for
Yeah,
your
yeah.
story. Yeah. So talking of which, why don't you tell us a little bit more? You've sort of given us a brief introduction, but tell us a little bit more about Secrets of the Land and the story and who might enjoy this story as well.
Yep, yep. I've just met some people up here in Taranaki, where I've come back to for a family thing. And some of them are my cousins I haven't seen for ages. There's one family who's got 15 children. And they're all going, I've read your novel, I've read your novel. I'm thinking, I didn't realize that. One
Wow.
said he was traveling in Europe and they got it on an ebook. And I suspect they were all looking to see what it was about. But
Yeah.
yes, I've had like men, quite often men have said they've read it and enjoyed it. And often you think when you're a writer that it would only be females that might like reading. But I think it's got enough action and I don't know, something, but a lot of men, you know, one guy recently said it was a they said damn good read, you know, that, and a lot of people have said things like it was a page turner and they couldn't put it down. I know. So that, yeah, and it's got good reviews for that sort of reason. But yeah, so it's a 3 periods of time all linking in. And then there's one person traveling between the 3 times, linking the story. And you hinted at supernatural. So
Yeah. So your main character, Imogen, or the contemporary character, she goes to see her grandfather, and presumably that sets off a chain of events. What is it that she's got to try and find out?
exactly why someone wants to get him scared off his farm. He's an old guy. He's very irritable and he's Irish and he doesn't want to be helped. And so she's not really welcomed in the local area. Like the radio guy the other day said, I like the bit where she went into a pub and, you know, hotel bar in the countryside and everyone just stopped. All the men stopped to look at her. So there's those sort of things, you know. So
Yeah.
she's not really welcomed, but on the other hand, she realizes something's going on, that bad things are happening on the land, like cattle are being let out and going down a road and getting lost, or somebody is threatening her grandfather and he's not prepared to say anything.
Okay. Oh, mystery ensues. And
There's
then,
lots of mystery. A bit of the other day, somebody started, I see it as a thriller. So one review did say a thriller-ish story. Yeah.
okay. And so,
So
yes,
quite a lot of things are going on. Sorry.
you did bring, you do have a supernatural element to it. So, what made you decide to bring that into the story?
I think at first, my character, I thought of him as a time traveler. And then people at the publishing company and people elsewhere kept saying, you know, the ghost. And then I thought, well, you know, so it was sort of the idea of someone having done wrong and then not being able to leave till he sorts it. That was what was going through my mind. Sort of a reparation thing. That he has no way of returning to his love, etc.
Yeah.
And until he makes right what's happened. So, and the land bit is because the same piece of land features from the New Zealand wars when British soldiers and other soldiers attacked Maori dwellings in Pa. And yeah.
Okay. Okay. So he's sort of almost he's the connecting piece between all of those 3 eras. And
Exactly.
so, if what other books might people have read if they want to, it would be a good sort of comparable for your book?
Oh, you've caught me now. I did have, I wrote it down. I think any sort of Irish style book. I mean, possibly The Time Traveler's Wife, because, you know, he travels. And that might have been the back of my mind. I haven't read it for years, but yeah, it's quite hard. A lot of those ones about finding a burial site in Ireland, I think the Burial or Hannah Kent, those sort of people.
Oh yes, yes, I've read her.
I feel like there's that sort of link to.
Yeah, I think you mentioned Kate Morton that you quite
Yes,
a
yeah,
nice.
the lake. So those sort of stories where something's happened, it's in the background, lurking, you know,
Lovely.
in a ghostly sort of manner.
So exciting. I'm looking forward to reading my copy.
Oh
And
yes, I hope you will.
it sounds like you're always writing, keeping busy, keeping busy. So
I
what are
am
you
actually.
working on now?
Sorry?
So what are you working on now?
Yeah. So I have this one I thought of a while back that seems to be how I operate. It's yeah, it's a couple of points of view, may even be 3. It's got a mystery, same sort of thing. It's got an older man, but he's the father this time, and there's 3 daughters. And it begins with him having a retirement party, you know, from his job, and then something goes wrong. So that sort of thing unfolding, similar
So are
mystery.
you drafting that at the moment now? So you don't
I
yet know
am.
the story.
I've written some chapters and then I'm stuck, but yeah.
Yeah. think we can all empathize with that feeling.
in the middle. I
Great.
know. I've sort of got the ending, and I know what the story is. I just have to get going.
Get going. Well,
Right.
Kate, it's been absolutely lovely learning more about you, your journey to writing, about Secrets of the Land and your writing process. So for those listeners who are interested in learning more about you and about your books, where's the best place for them to go and find out?
Sure. Just try my website, which is www.katemahony, with no E, by the way. People put E's in all the time. Author.com. And I've got lots of my short stories. I've got links to them. I've got news items saying sort of marketing I've done. And yeah, that's a good place to get started.
Fabulous. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. It's been lovely.
Oh, thank you. Very nice to speak to you all the way from New Zealand and in the middle of the night. No, it's only 11 p.m, I think. 10:30. But that's wonderful.